Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Making Milestones. And this is the second episode, and I'm really glad to get started. All right, so I'm going to share my screen, and we will start with the presentation. All right. Well, so Making Milestones is a web series to help families of kids with special needs achieve the impossible. And welcome to episode 2, where we are going to be discussing what is the Doman Method. And we're going to talk about how the Doman Method helps support kids with special needs. This web series is hosted by myself, Spencer Doman, and Doman International, an organization which teaches holistic solutions to families of children with special needs so that their kids can reach their fullest potential in life. So in this episode, I'm going to be talking about, first, what is the Doman Method? Next, how the Doman Method helps kids with special needs and the kinds of children that can be helped. Third, why so many treatments and so many therapies don't work for kids with neurodevelopmental delays and special needs, and why that leads to so much frustration and difficulties for their families. And I'm going to finish off by giving you 8 facts of child development or about child development that no professional will likely ever tell you. So let's get started. So when talking about the Doman Method, we have to take a little bit of a step back and start by talking about Glenn Doman. Glenn Doman was my grandfather, and it is a great honor to uh, be able to carry on his life's work. And I just want to tell you a little bit about him because it's so important when talking about the Doman Method, which has been around for decades, to begin with him. Well, he was trained as a physical therapist, but he found that the conventional therapies that he had learned in school were not helping his patients. And he worked specifically with children and with adults who had suffered brain injury. And well, he fortunately for the world was a very impatient person. And when he found that the therapies were not getting good results, he started to turn his attention toward developing treatments that would work, that would get someone who couldn't move to walk, from getting someone who was speechless to talking, someone who was blind to seeing, whatever that symptom was of their brain injury. He worked relentlessly to find answers. So he not only created new treatments, he also found that he got the best possible results when he taught parents and families of kids with special needs the treatments themselves. So he essentially found the answers and then gave them to the families. And I'll be talking about why this is so important. But he found he got the very best results when he could work hand in hand with the families to create and to do the best possible treatment for these children. All of the treatments are designed to improve brain development and function. And I'll be talking about why that's so important in this episode. And so as he gained notoriety, as he became famous throughout his lifetime, people started to call his work the Doman Method. He did not choose that name, but people used that name as a way of honoring him and honoring his work. And so we very proudly use that term today in honor of him. And he's probably best known around the world for his best-selling books about child development, which have sold millions of copies all around the world and have been used by parents to help their children, both kids with special needs and neurotypical children. Well, just to tell you a little bit about myself, because I figure if you're tuning in, it's good for you to know a little bit about who's talking throughout this episode. My name is Spencer Doman, and I'm the Chief Innovation Officer for Doman International. And you might have guessed already that the way I really got into this work is through my family. My grandfather, Glenn, and my grandmother, Katie, you can see my grandmother here with me, they were pioneers. And so my father and mother, Douglas and Rosalind, also joined this work. And so I really grew up in a unique environment where, if you can imagine, my grandparents and my parents worked in a clinic in Philadelphia. And so young Spencer kind of grew up in this environment where I was surrounded by children with special needs. And in fact, I grew up, I actually lived on the campus where they worked. So for me, I was coming into contact and interacting and playing with kids with all kinds of developmental issues. And observing those children and those families gave me great insight, I think, into, first of all, the challenges that they are facing on a daily basis, the frustrations, the difficulties, but also gave me a huge admiration for the perseverance and the toughness and the love that those families had for one another. And so by the time I was in college, I knew what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to do this work. And so getting to watch my grandparents and parents working hand in hand with these families and watching their children make huge gains, often greatly outperforming what other doctors and what other professionals had ever thought, really impacted me. And I realized that no child is hopeless, that every kid deserves a fighting chance. And it's a pleasure to get to be a part of that each and every day. So let's talk for a second about why there are so many treatments out there that fail kids with special needs, right? And for parents out there who have stumbled upon this episode, you might at this point be exhausted by all the information that's out there, and everything that you've tried with your child might have failed, and all the frustrations that come with that. So let's talk about why so many treatments just don't work. There are various reasons, but one common reason is that many professionals have limiting beliefs, and they don't believe that kids with special needs can really be helped, that those kids can really progress, really develop, and really get better. And that's a real problem, because if you have professionals who don't really believe that a child can be helped, well, are they really out there looking for new answers? It's kind of one of these things that if you don't think a problem has a solution, are you going to even look for the solution? And so many don't. They just assume the patients won't get better, and they have a kind of wait and see approach. And many parents tell me they just get infuriated when they're told over and over again, wait and see, wait and see, wait and see. And so you'll notice in this episode, I'll never tell you to wait and see. Next, the world has tried to treat the symptoms that the kids are dealing with rather than treating the root cause of the problem. I'll say that again. They've tried to treat the symptoms that the kids have rather than addressing the root cause of the problem. So for example, a child doesn't move their body well, and so the child goes to a physical therapist, and so the physical therapist does certain arm and leg movements with the child, right? The child has some speaking problems, and so a speech therapist tries to get them to speak. They don't use their hands well. They go to an occupational therapist who gives them activities to try to get them to use their hands. The problem is that for these children, the problem isn't in their mouths, right? The problem isn't in their arms or legs. It's not in their hands. The problem is in their brain. And the brain is the body's command center. Everything that we are doing all day long is a result of our brain telling our body what to do. So the problem is you can't treat the symptoms and get the root cause of the problem to go away. You can't fix a problem by treating the symptoms. You have to treat the problem, the root cause, and then the symptoms start to go away. So in other words, you have to treat the brain And then when the brain starts to improve, then all of a sudden the child can begin to speak, begin to move their arms and legs better, begin to use their hands, because now you're actually addressing the problem itself. To give you a maybe example of this, imagine for a second if I went to a doctor and I said, "Doctor, something's really wrong. I've got terrible chest pains, terrible chest pains, and I can't feel my left arm. I haven't felt it for the last 30 minutes, and I feel incredibly nauseous and sick." A bad doctor would say, "Well, I'm going to give you a muscle relaxant pill for your chest pains because you're dealing with pains in your chest. Take this pill for that. And I'm going to massage your left arm because you're not feeling your left arm. And here's some anti-nausea medication for your nausea," right? A bad doctor would do that. A good doctor would look at those symptoms and say, "The problem is you're having a heart attack. And so I need to address the root cause, which is the heart attack. And then the symptoms will go away," right? If the heart is fixed, I'm not going to have that numbness in the left arm and the chest pains and so on. So that's all very obvious to us, right? My example is almost ridiculous, right? Of an idea, the idea of a doctor trying to treat the symptoms. But for children with special needs and with neurodevelopmental conditions, that is the norm. That is what exists out there for most of those children. And there are very few professionals who are actually asking, where's the root cause of this child's problem and how do I address that root cause? And that is a fundamental part of the Doman method. If we treat the symptoms, we will never fix the source of the problem. But if the root cause of a child's developmental delays, it could be in speech, physical development, vision, hearing, motor skills, whatever it is in the brain, we must treat the root cause. Now, once we know what the root cause is, we have to kind of untangle the next big question. And this is the big confusion that exists with kids with special needs. There are so many diagnoses that are used to describe children with neurodevelopmental conditions. So many diagnoses. Let's look at some of them. Autism, right? Cerebral palsy, ADHD, learning problems or learning difficulties, epilepsy, right? Seizures, developmental delay, mental retardation. By the way, we don't use these terms. These are terms that we see being used to describe the children that we help. Traumatic brain injury, cortical blindness and visual impairment, trisomy 21 and other chromosomal abnormalities, and hundreds more. So looking at this list, what do all of these children have in common? All of these kids have neurodevelopmental conditions, right? All of them have a set of symptoms. They're a result of something that has happened in their brain, right? Now, something injured that child's brain and hurt their brain function. It might have happened during pregnancy. It might have happened during the birthing process if it was a traumatic birth. It might have happened after birth. It completely depends on the child. But the thing is that while you might look at a child with autism, right, who's hyperactive and who doesn't speak, and a child with cerebral palsy who might be physically spastic and unable to move, while those two children might look very different, it's important to understand that for all of these children, all of them, the root cause of their problem is in the brain. And once we treat that root cause, we will start to see their symptoms go away. And so that's why at Doman International, because we are brain focused, our treatments are designed to treat the brain. We can help children with all these different kinds of diagnoses. And by the way, many, many more that I haven't even had the opportunity to mention. Now, why? Why are we able to have success? Well, it's because neuroplasticity is the human brain's ability to change, right? Neuroplasticity is the key, all right? And so often, parents of kids with special needs are never told this, right? No one ever talks about neuroplasticity with them. But the wonderful thing about the human brain is it is able to change. That's what neuroplasticity is. Neuroplasticity can come as a result of stimulation or activity. And really, the question is, what is the right kind of stimulation and the right kind of activity to get neuroplasticity to occur? So, the human brain, is called plastic, right? In the sense like it can change, it can develop. The neural connections, so these are the connections between brain cells called neurons, can change, can increase, can grow, based on the kinds of stimulation and the kinds of activities that a child is engaged in. So by knowing the right kinds of stimulation to give a kid and the right kinds of activity, we can get that result that we're looking for. And so it's really our responsibility to create programs which lead to improvements in brain function. Right, so I'll show you some photos during this presentation, but here you can see young Nicole, a child on our program. Nicole is, by the way, diagnosed with a rare genetic condition, which led to a developmental delay. And she is doing a program on the Doman Method program called brachiation. And you can see Nicole is traveling from bar to bar with her feet completely off the ground. Now, looking at this program, someone might look at this activity and say, oh, it looks like a girl just enjoying going across a set of monkey bars. And of course, that is what's happening. But more importantly are the brain changes that are taking place because of this activity. First of all, when Nicole travels from rung to rung, right, on this, what is called a brachiation ladder, it is improving her pincer grasp, okay? And the pincer grasp is essential for fine motor skills and for writing, right? So we need that pincer grasp in order to do so many of the things that we do in life. So many parents lament about why their child's manual function doesn't improve. Well, knowing the right kinds of activities can get those kind of neuroplasticity changes that we are looking for. And so programs like brachiation, one of many physical programs in the Doman Method, can be helpful in this regard. Well, the next kind of essential thing to understand about the Doman Method is that parents are the most important therapists in a child's life. You know, I remember when I was in my first course, I was in a program getting my master's in early childhood education. And here I was with 25 other educators, and the first thing the professor told us was, it doesn't matter how good an educator you are. The most important person in a child's academic life and success are their parents. And well, it's the same thing for a child's development. Parents are the most important individuals in a child's life. And in our case, with the Doman Method, parents are the best therapists. And this is one of the things that Glenn Doman figured out early on, and was one of the reasons why the Doman Method was so successful, because no one loves a child more than their parents, right? And that means that the parents are more dedicated to the child's betterment than anyone else. Also, no one is more willing to give time for a child's well-being than parents, and that's very important. Sometimes parents will say to me, Spencer, how can I bring you to my home to do, a program with my child? And I say, well, there's no possible way that I could do that with every child in the world, right? I couldn't achieve the results with so many kids if I were to do that. So the best way to do it is to teach the people who are with the child as much as possible what to do. So if they know what to do, if you know what to do as parents, you can get the very best possible results. Also, kids are most comfortable with their parents. Very often they're apprehensive or skeptical around professionals. Another great reason for parents to know exactly what to do. So if parents are empowered with the information that they need to help their children, they can apply the treatment consistently at home and with love. So that's why those two first important facts for you to understand is neuroplasticity is the key, and parents are the best therapists for their kids. Well, the next most important fact is to understand that there's really no relationship between special needs and intelligence. And I want to explain this a bit more because this is something that the outside world just doesn't get and never tells parents. So the first important thing is to understand just because a child can't talk, it doesn't mean that they can't understand. Very frequently, I will get reports from another professional when a parent comes to Doman International for the first time. And the report will say something like, this child has an immeasurable IQ because the child does not speak. And that's really, to be honest, a bunch of foolishness, right? The idea that because a child doesn't speak, it means that they don't understand. This is a very dangerous attitude, and honestly is something that hurts so many children, because if the professional thinks right off the bat that the child is not intelligent, it means they're going to close certain doors to the child. They're going to say, well, the child couldn't potentially learn this or understand that, so let's not even try to develop them cognitively. They're just not smart enough. And that's very problematic. And this is really a silly idea, because our ability to understand speech is an auditory ability. It's the right now you're listening to me, and your auditory pathway that leads from your ear to your brain is carrying information. It's a sensory ability, the ability to hear. Speech is a motor ability, right? Information is going from the brain to the organs of the mouth that allow me to speak. So hearing and speech are not the same two neurological abilities. So just because you can't do one doesn't mean you can't do the other. So many children with special needs are highly intelligent, highly intelligent. They may not be able to speak well, but some of them understand everything that they're being told. Their difficulty is with expressing their intelligence, right? So they have limits in mobility, in speech, in manual ability. And so that makes it very difficult for them to demonstrate how much they understand. But just because they can't show how much they understand, it doesn't mean that they can't understand. And also, it just means that the professionals need to find other ways to allow the child to communicate their intelligence in the meantime until they can walk and talk and use their hands. But unfortunately, if you believe a child doesn't understand anything in the first place, you won't try to find other ways to help that child communicate that intelligence. And so that's why improving communication ability between parents and children with special needs is such an integral part of this Doman method. We never assume a child is unintelligent just because they can't speak. It would be like, imagine for a second, everyone I think knows the great late Dr. Stephen Hawking, who unfortunately later in life contracted something called motor neuron disease, where his motor neurons, his brain cells that governed his speech and manual ability and mobility, started to die off. And because of that, he lost his ability to speak and move. And fortunately for Dr. Hawking, he had a communication device that allowed him to communicate. And so everyone knew he was smart, even though he couldn't speak and move. But I would ask you to think for a second, what if Dr. Stephen Hawking had been born the way he was later in life? If he had been born the way he was later in life, would anyone have ever thought he was a brilliant person? Would anyone have thought that he had the possibility of being a brilliant astrophysicist? The answer is, unfortunately and sadly, as we all know, probably not, because people would have looked at him and said, he can't walk, he can't talk, he's not smart, right? That is a terrible conclusion to come to, and one that hurts a lot of children. Now, something that I've noticed if I speak to a parent and I say to the parent, mom or dad, is your kid smart? Your kid with special needs, even if they can't speak, are they smart? And very often the parents are maybe a little wary at first. They'll say, well, we brought him in for testing and they told me my child doesn't understand. And I say, okay, but what do you think? You tell me if your kid is smart or not. Very often, after I've asked them a few times, the mom will say, or the dad will say, yeah, he's smart. And I'll say, how do you know that? And they'll say, look at his eyes. Look at his eyes. Look how bright they are. I can tell he understands what's going on. He's smart. And while that might be very unscientific, that is brilliant because we do tell so much about people from their eyes, by their reactions, from their environment. And so that's really a brilliant thing that moms and dads have done since the dawn of time. And so when that parent says, he's smart, look at him, I can tell, we've found that they are basically nearly always correct. And so in our program, it doesn't matter if a child can't walk, can't talk. We do everything from a cognitive standpoint to get that child reading, doing math, learning all kinds of encyclopedic knowledge based on what is ideal for that child. We don't believe in limiting our kids because they happen to have certain difficulties. All right. Well, the next fact is that a holistic, integrative approach is needed to help treat the brain. A holistic, integrative approach is needed to treat the brain. Let's just look at a few facts for a second to kind of illustrate this point. Well, first of all, right now, as I'm speaking to you, I am likely using maybe 8 to 12 different areas of my brain working in unison to speak, right? It's not just one area, it's various areas working together. Let's look at another fact. Outside of our brain, the largest number of neurons, brain cells, are located in the digestive tract. Okay, so in our stomach, in our intestines, there are brain cells that are constantly communicating with our brain, and our brain is communicating with our gut, right? So brain cells are not just in the brain, they are constantly communicating with other neurons in other parts of our body. Let's look at another fact. Kids with regular aerobic physical activity score higher on academic exams. So children that engage in physical activity, specifically physical activity, which is optimal for heart and heart function. And when we have optimal heart function, we also have optimal oxygenation, which is important for brain development. Those children score higher on academic exams. So why am I giving these different facts? Well, all of them are good explanations for why we need a holistic approach, right? If we need to be able to help various areas of the brain to get someone to speak, if we know that it's not just about treating the brain, but there are also brain cells in the digestive tract, if we know that physical development helps aid cognitive development, we know that we need to have a holistic approach to address all of these different areas. So that's why the Doman method includes cognitive, sensory, speech, and physical development programs, which are customized and optimized for the child. We also create an ideal nutrition program, right? As I said, there are many neurons in the digestive tract. So that means having an ideal diet and supplementation for the children on our program. Well, looking at the next fact, again, and remember, we're going through facts here that professionals will often never tell parents. The next fact is about the importance of the senses and how we have to utilize the 5 sensory pathways to get information to the brain. Now, it's important for you to understand that your child can learn about the world. They can only experience and learn from the world around them using 5 abilities. And those are their 5 senses. They can see, they can hear, they can feel, they can taste, and they can smell. Everything your child has ever learned in their life, anything you've ever learned, anything Albert Einstein ever learned was only through those 5 pathways. Why is that so important to understand? Well, if one of those pathways is interrupted or not functioning correctly, it's going to limit your child's ability to learn about the world around them. So children with neurodevelopmental conditions often have difficulties with one, several, or sometimes all 5 of these senses. And so that's often a barrier to them learning about the world around them and interacting in a correct way with the world around them. So what we do, we provide very specific kinds of sensory stimulation so that a child can learn how to see normally, hear normally, feel normally, taste, and smell normally. If a child can experience, sense the world normally around them, they will learn so much faster. Right now, your ability to learn from this presentation is based on your vision, your reading the notes as they come up, and perhaps watching me, and also hearing, you're listening. These sensory pathways determine everything about our ability to learn. And that's why sensory stimulation to improve these 5 senses, and also sensory stimulation has been demonstrated with scientific study to be crucial for neuroplasticity. This is why it's such an important part of our program. So when we can improve the 5 senses, their development greatly improves. Well, going on to the next fact, we really need 3 essential components to having success with a treatment program. 3 essential components. Now, you might have even watched certain parts of this presentation so far and thought, well, certain things that Spencer's saying I've heard of before. I've heard certain people say nutrition is important for children with special needs. I've heard some people talk about sensory integration. So I've heard some of these things. Maybe this is well known all around the world. Here's the thing, though. You have to understand 3 essential components to having success with a treatment program. The first is frequency. How many times are you supposed to do that activity or that stimulation to get the desired result? Next, intensity. How strong does that stimulation have to be? And third, duration. How long does a session have to be? Right? So let's take, for example, sensory stimulation. Certainly, there are many groups out there that know that sensory stimulation, visual stimulation, auditory stimulation, tactile stimulation is important. Many of them don't know exactly what to do. They don't know the right kinds of materials and equipment to use, but many of them know that this is important. But the problem is they don't know this. They don't know the frequency, intensity, and duration of how much to do those activities, how strong to do those activities, and how long to do those activities. And this is essential. It would be like going to a personal trainer, and the personal trainer told you, you need to lower your calories and you need to increase your physical activity. And you would say to them, okay, thank you, but I need more information, right? With my exercise, how many times am I supposed to exercise in a week? How strong, how tough should my exercise be? And how long should I be exercising for? And what should I be doing? That is what we do at Doman International. We tell you exactly what to do for your child. And then we say, this is the frequency that you should do it, the intensity, and the duration. 3 essential components that are almost always overlooked with the treatment of children. So we have worked to become experts, not just in the right treatments, but what is the ideal frequency, intensity, and duration. Well, let's look at the next fact, the next important thing for you to understand about your child. And well, it's important for you to know that as I've said, that kids with special needs can be highly intelligent, and also that we can prescribe and recommend the best possible activities for your child, of course, you can achieve amazing things. And this has allowed us to develop cognitive programs for kids with special needs that are unparalleled around the world, right? So children have an unbelievable ability to learn, an unbelievable potential. And so I'd like to show you a short video of this video, of one of these examples. I can't give you, because of lack of time, a lot of information about the different Doman Method cognitive programs. But I'd like to show you a short video that shows our reading program in action, because I think it will show you the great potential of so many kids with special needs, and also help you understand how we go about teaching kids with special needs. So you're going to see a short video of a boy with a developmental delay, Noah, and he's been taught using the Doman Method reading program. And in fact, this video was taken after the first week of his program. So he had only been doing it for 1 week. And mom wanted to see if she was getting results with this reading program. So let's watch this short video, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about what you've just seen.
What is it? Pig. Where's pig? Where's pig? Good. What is it? A cow. Good. What is it? A sheep. Black sheep. How about this one? Noah? What is it? A horse. Very good. How about this one? Where is it? Got tired. Look, Noah. Very good. Beautiful.
So let me tell you a little bit about what you just saw. First of all, I'd like you to take note that Noah is not able to read aloud yet, but that has not stopped us from starting to teach him how to read. Here you can see that the mom has large red words. Now, why is that? Why is that a crucial part of the Doman Method reading program? Well, first of all, we use large print when teaching children how to read. This is very important because for many kids with special needs, they have visual immaturity. They have visual problems that make it difficult for them to learn how to read, especially small text, tiny text. So by enlarging the text, it makes it easier for the child to read. Also, we teach them using single words. So here you can see Noah has learned how to read words with one word on a card at a time. This has allowed him to learn each word on its own, and not just learn how to recognize the words, but you can see in the video, he clearly understands what the words mean because he can connect those words with an object, a toy, in his environment. So often for kids who cannot speak, they are given really very limited kinds of early stimulation, right? Or it's very primitive forms of stimulation. There are very few people out there talking about how can we get a 4-year-old or 5-year-old child with special needs who can't speak well. How do we get them reading? How do we get them doing math? How do we get them to learn about a variety of subjects? So when we send them to school, they can be as successful as possible. That is a crucial part of the Doman Method program. And we don't believe that challenges with speech or mobility should stop us from teaching a kid in the best possible way. Now, the next fact that, again, these are things that you'll never hear professionals talk about. Gravity is the enemy for so many kids with special needs, but we need to turn the enemy of gravity and make it into a friend, okay? So Gravity makes it difficult for a child with special needs to learn how to move and eventually walk, right? So many children, especially children diagnosed with certain developmental delays, cerebral palsy, spasticity, they very often have great limitations in their ability to move their bodies. So if you were to take that child and put them down on the floor, they might be able to move their arms and legs, but they wouldn't be able to move forward at all. They can't crawl on the ground, or they can't get up and walk, or they might be able to do these things, but in a very limited capacity. So gravity pulls the child down to the center of the earth, right? Gravity is a force that's always pulling us down. And for children who cannot move, gravity makes it more difficult for them. It makes it difficult for them to be able to stand up and walk because gravity is always pushing them down. Now, we must take the enemy of gravity and turn it into a friend for these kids. So we have, doing this, following this principle, we have developed a pathway to walking for kids that need it. So for children who are immobile, how do we go step by step in order to get that child to walk? So let's just talk briefly about this process. Well, let's look at a little girl here. Her name is Theodora, and in this case, she's unable to move. You put her on the floor, she can't move at all. Well, for a child who's unable to move at all, learning how to walk is a very difficult thing. Walking requires coordination, strength, balance. All of those things are difficult to come by. And so we have learned we need to follow the same milestones for children with special needs that we follow or that are naturally occur with neurotypical children. When you look at an average baby in the first year of their life, they will begin by crawling on the floor on their belly. So on the floor on their belly, they will begin to learn how to crawl forward. Then next, they get up on their hands and knees and they begin to creep in their environment. So moving their hands and knees, they are able to learn how to balance and move themselves around their environment. Next, they learn how to get up on their feet and begin the process of walking. So if we have a child who's immobile, how are we going to start that child on this process? Well, first thing we have to do, we have to get them moving on the floor. But the problem is getting them to crawl on the floor is so difficult if they have a brain injury, if they have a neurodevelopmental condition. So we take the enemy of gravity and we turn it into a friend. So here you can see Theodora, who is learning how to crawl on an inclined floor. This is a floor surface which is inclined, but it's made to be optimal for her to learn how to crawl. I'd like to show you a video of a girl learning how to crawl on the inclined floor. You're going to see that she has very limited mobility, and you're going to see two videos. The first video is of her learning how to crawl on the inclined floor, and then the second video is her crawling on the actual flat floor. Let's watch. Watch as she's really just using her legs right now to move forward. But because it's inclined, she's able to move forward, even with limited movement. And now, here she is, just a few months later. Please note how she's using her arms now. Her function has greatly improved as she learned to crawl more and more. And you can see she's always crawling for something, right? There's always a motivation for her to crawl. So you can see the inclined floor is so simple, but so brilliant. In taking a child who's unable to move, taking the enemy of gravity, making it into a friend, the child learns how to crawl first on the inclined and then later on the flat floor. Here you can see another photo, and here we are using a more advanced piece of equipment, our anti-gravity program, which allows a child who is unable to creep on their hands and knees yet. And so this girl is learning how it feels to creep, right? So again, gravity would make it impossible for her at this point to get up on her hands and knees. But with the help of the anti-gravity program, her body is feeling how it feels to creep. And so that is going to be crucial for her in that process of learning how to creep independently. Lastly, once a child has learned how to creep, the next step is teaching them how to walk. And here you're going to see a brilliant but simple program called Glenn's Ladder, named after its discoverer or creator, my grandfather Glenn. And you're going to see that, again, it takes the enemy of gravity and makes it into a friend. It's very difficult for a child with mobility problems to learn how to stand up, bear their weight, balance themselves. But with this program, with Glenn's Ladder, you're going to see that the child, by holding the bar above them, they are able to sustain their weight. And so gravity pulls their body down. But now, because the child is holding the bars above the head, their body is straightened, right? And that's very difficult for many children, right? It's difficult for them to learn how to walk upright, right? Straight with their, their ability to lock their knees as they walk. Here you're going to see Nicolas learning how to walk under Glenn's ladder. The other wonderful thing is you're going to see that as he moves one hand forward, he will also move the opposing leg forward, and so on. This is teaching the two hemispheres of the brain, the two sides of the brain, to work in coordination with one another in walking, which of course is an essential part of movement for humans, right? When I walk, my right arm moves forward as my left leg moves forward, and my left arm moves forward as my right leg moves forward. Okay, let's watch this video of Nicolas learning how to walk. So I hope you've gotten a good idea of how we could take a child who's completely immobile, doesn't crawl, teach them how to crawl, creep, and then walk to achieve that desired result of them being able to walk using some very simple but absolutely amazing pieces of equipment that we've created over the decades. Well, I want to talk a bit more now about just how you can learn more about Doman International and the Doman Method. And I think the next steps, if you're just learning about the Doman Method, is to visit www.domaninternational.org and contact us through the website. And depending on where you are in the world, one of our worldwide representatives will contact you, and they can answer your questions and also talk to you about if the Doman Method is ideal for your child. So if you go to our website, you'll see there's that green button there at the top right-hand corner of the page that says contact. Just click on the contact button, fill out the form, and one of our representatives will contact you as soon as possible. The next step after reaching out to us is to consider signing up for my free webinar called An Introduction to the Doman Method. In many ways, this episode is a short intro to that lecture, but in that course, I go into far more information about the Doman Method and give a lot of practical recommendations to families. You can find that at www.domaninternational.org/free webinar. So if you go to that link, you will be able to view the webinar. Now, if you'd like to learn more about Doman International, if you'd like to find out about upcoming events and more about how we help kids with special needs, if you are watching on YouTube, please subscribe so that you can see all of our videos. If you are watching on Facebook, please like us and follow us. If you're watching us on Instagram, please follow our page. And if you're someone who doesn't want to miss a beat, please feel free to do all three. Thanks so much for joining me for this episode of Making Milestones, and we'll be back with another episode next week. Thanks so much.